Talk series titled Echoes of Ajanta, tracing its influence on modern art in India. Art is not what you see, but what you make others see, said Edgar Degas. His words have got particular relevance in reference to Ajanta and the classic mural art that is found inside the Ajanta caves. Well, no, there is no doubt about the fact that time seems to have stood still inside the Ajanta caves. It is equally true that the fantastic art that is there inside seems to have developed its own visual language with which it is continuously, proliferously, profusely, and vividly communicating with generations of Indian artists right till today. I would say generations of artists across the world, in fact. Ajanta caves that have been dated from 2nd century BC to 6th century CE are not only treasure troves of Buddhist devotion and Buddhist art, but they also represent the pinnacle of ancient Indian aesthetic appreciation, should we say, or aesthetic achievement, we can say. Through the flowing lines, graceful forms, and the emotive expressions, the Ajanta art has developed its own cultural ethos, which is visited again and again by artists, not only looking for inspiration or identity, but also to build a bridge between tradition and modernity. We are extremely lucky today to have with us Yamini Telkar, an art specialist who will be exploring these masterpieces from Ajanta and also their influence on the pioneering artists of modern art in India, right from the Bengal school to the 21st century artists. With its narrative style, visual idiom, and the spiritual depth, the Ajanta art was not only forming a cultural marker or a reference point for our pre-independence artists who were looking to assert their voice on the face of colonial academicism, but even today, as they struggle to establish an identity in the global arena. With Yamini, we'll be undertaking this wonderful journey, fantastic interplay between the past and the present, where Ajanta is not merely a relic, but a living, breathing influence on the continuity of modern Indian creativity. A very warm welcome to you, Yamini. We're really happy to have you here. Before we move on to the main program, I'd like to give you a brief introduction about Tamil Heritage Trust, which is our organization. Tamil Heritage Trust or Tamil Paramparya ArtKyk is a voluntary organization started by a group of like-minded people almost 15 years ago with the objective of understanding, appreciating, disseminating and celebrating information related to India's history and rich heritage, not just for the scholarly and the academic minded, but the enthusiastic average public as well. Towards this end, THT conducts several events, initiatives, and programs throughout the year. Chief amongst these are our talks and seminars. Our most important event is the monthly Heritage Talk, and as I already told you, we are in the midst of the July 2025 edition. Another event that we conduct is called the Pechu Kacheri or the Oratory Concert, which is an in-person event conducted in the month of December for 2 days to collaborate and corroborate with the Margari Ishai Kacheris of Chennai. The third important event that we conduct under this subheading is the Indology Festival, which is a more scholarly and academic event conducted in the month of June. We are extremely happy to say that the Indology Festival 2025 that concluded only about 2 weeks back was titled Wanderers and Witnesses, Travelers' Tales of India, and across 6 days, we had 11 brilliant speakers bringing their research and scholarship to this common platform to deliver insightful and fantastic lectures. And it was a resounding success from the kind of feedback that we got from our audience. Apart from our talks and seminars, we also conduct various workshops. One of our workshops is called Housam or How to See a Museum, and we just had the latest version of it last Sunday. Here are some of the photographs. In the forenoon, we had 3 lectures, and in the afternoon, the participants were taken to the Chennai IGNOU Museum, where they had a guided tour of the Stone Sculpture Gallery, Bronze Gallery, and the Numismatics Gallery. Another one-day workshop that we conduct is called House Art, or How to See a Temple. We're delighted to tell you that the next session of House Art will be on August 3rd, 2025 from 9 a.m. to 6 p.m. The venue will be ArtKyk Convention Center for the forenoon lectures and Kapaleshwara Temple for the site visit in the afternoon. All the promotional material regarding this will be out in a day or two. Anybody who is interested can register and participate. Apart from this, we also conduct various classroom sessions on and off on a variety of topics like Pallava Grantham script, ancient Indian astronomy, ancient Indian mathematics, etc. Another initiative of ours is called Alamar Avai, where the target audience are the school teachers of Tamil Nadu. Over a series of weekend lectures, various aspects of Indian history and heritage are discussed, the idea being that the teachers take it back to their students, thus further spreading awareness. Docent training is another recent initiative of ours, where participants are given training to prepare them to present historical sites and heritage monuments in a professional manner to the enthusiastic audience. The batch 2 of this training graduated only earlier this year, and we'll soon be announcing registrations for the batch 3. Site Seminar is another initiative of ours, which is a largely in-house activity meant for our own education and self-enhancement. We zero in upon a particular site anywhere in India, and our volunteers study the same in depth for several weeks. Then we have a number of in-house seminars, and armed with all this knowledge, we visit the site to experience it in its totality and in an immersive manner. Apart from our initiatives from Tamil Heritage Trust, we also give 2 awards annually. The first such award is called THT Professor S. Swaminathan Heritage Award, named after our co-founder, and is given for individual contributions in the field of Indian history and heritage. We are extremely happy to say that from this moment, we are opening the nominations window for this award for the year 2025, and this window will be open till August 15th, 2025. There is only one primary criteria here, that the nominee should be less than 50 years of age. This is because we want that our award, reward, or recognition should be given to the awardee at a time when he's still on his journey and not post-retirement. So all of you who know of anybody who you think is worthy of receiving this award, kindly nominate them. Again, the promotional material in relation to this will be out in a day or two, either in your mailbox or in the social media. The other award that we give is called the V. Venkaya Epigraphy Award and is given for individual contribution in the field of Indian epigraphy. Named after V. Venkaya, who was the first official Indian epigraphist, this award has been instituted by Miss Sunita Madhavan, his great-granddaughter. THT has been entrusted with the responsibility of administering this award. Just a moment. Yeah. This year, we had a total of 21 nominations for this award, including those received in 2023 and 2024. We had an eminent jury panel comprising of Dr. V. Vedachalam, Senior Epigraphist, retired from Department of Archaeology, Government of Tamil Nadu; Dr. A.K. Singh, Professor, retired, School of Studies in Ancient History and Culture and Archaeology, Shivaji University, Gwalior; Dr. S.K. Acharya, Historian, Epigrapher and Archaeologist, who retired from Ravenshaw University, Cuttack; and Sri Jayaprakash, Director, Epigraphy, retired from Archaeological Survey of India. We are extremely happy to say that our jury met and unanimously chose as the winner for this year, Senior Epigraphist, Professor Srinivas V. Padigar. To know more about Mr. Padigar and to hear his award-winning lecture, kindly join us on July 26, 2025 at ArtKyk Convention Center, Mylapore, where this event will be held. We have a YouTube channel where you will find links to all our past programs right down to today's talk. Kindly subscribe to the channel and click on the bell icon to receive notifications of future events. These are our social media handles. This is our mailing address. You can mail us here to join our mailing list, or if you want to join any of our initiatives or programs in a voluntary capacity. Last but not the least, we are a voluntary organization. We do not have any dedicated financial backing. So any kind of financial contributions are welcome. You can use this QR code or address to donate generously, and it will be highly appreciated. That, in a nutshell, was about THT. Now, moving on to today's talk. As I already mentioned, the Ajanta murals have echoed across generations of artists, from colonial era documenters, art school students and pioneers, through ASI affiliated practitioners to modern painters. Their influence is visible not only in visual style and technique, but also in the very conception of what constitutes Indian modern art. Into all this and more, we will be led by our speaker today, Yamini Telkar, an art specialist. An Indian art specialist with over 30 years of experience in the art industry and academia, Yamini Telkar has curated the artworks for Terminal 2 of Bangalore International Airport and serves as a senior advisor there. Author of a guidance document on integrating art in public spaces and consultant for Zinnov's public space initiatives, she is also the director for Sameksha Art Gallery Delhi and is the co-founder of ArtKyk, an online platform that aims at making art accessible. With an MPhil from Jawaharlal Nehru University, Yamini has taught art history at prestigious institutions and delivered numerous talks on art throughout India. Without further ado, I invite Yamini to take over the stage and deliver her lecture today. Once again, a very warm welcome to you. We're delighted to have you here.
Thank you so much. I think, the introduction that was given to today's talk puts everything in a nutshell and extremely, in an extremely precise manner, because that's what I'm going to do today. Walk you through the process, raising certain questions and trying to give an answer that will kind of make this topic that much more relevant. The talk, I think, is going to be structured around three timelines, where it begins with what we call as the rediscovery, which is in the early part of the 19th century, 1819. Then the excitement that rediscovery caused in for Indologists, for archaeologists and documenters of the exotic country that was India. And then in the early parts of the 20th century, how the documentation kind of takes place by people of the nation, and why the documentation becomes that much more critical for the people. And here my focus is going to be obviously only within the art community and the art world. I'm not going to be looking at archaeologists or art historians or even historians for that matter, because I want to kind of drive home a point on the significance or the hold that Ajanta had over artists. And it has multiple levels that it kind of becomes significant. I begin by asking this question, or which kind of keeps coming up in my mind, saying, why is the influence of Ajanta so significant? Why Ajanta? And what is the context, or what is the time period that this kind of starts taking root within the country? So, like I said, the time period that we are referring to is almost, that I'm going to be focusing on is the later part of the 19th century to the early part of the 20th century. And that time for a nation like India was a time where questions about identity, nationalism were being played out in the vast landscape that existed, not only for artists or art historians or writers, but across the nation. And there were two kind of, I use these arrows, which are like, opposing forces which were at play. which are very dominant, is, I begin with this, the picture on the right, which is by Raja Ravi Varma, which is interestingly a portrait of, the Diwan who served as a Diwan for Baroda and for even Travancore, which was Madhav Rao, his Sir Madhav Rao, which was completely painted using the European academic realism. It was an oil painting on canvas. The subject was Indian, but the style of delivery was completely European at that particular point in time. And then that was contrasted by what was being done in Calcutta at that time. I use the word Calcutta because I'm referring to that particular time phrase, where it was about revivalism. And revivalism of what? Revivalism of Indian identity, of the Indian way of painting. Because what had happened was that the thinkers, be as they may, of that particular point in time, were suddenly questioning the blatant use of European way of life, European style of painting everywhere, and the Indian artist or the Indian thought was kind of left behind. And this movement actually starts taking place from Calcutta with two people, which was E.B. Howell and Abanindranath Tagore. I'm not going to take too much time here, but this is just to set the context. So you had two different ways of, dealing with or unpacking the question of identity, or for artists who are painting, like who are we and what are we painting? And for people, what is it that we should look at, or what is it, that as Indians living in that particular point in time should talk about? Because this was also the time when the freedom struggle was kind of gaining momentum. So these were the two trends which existed, because Raja Ravi Verma, did do something that was very different, bold, and made a statement. He becomes the first artist. And you had Abanindranath Tagore, E.B. Howell, Ananda Kumaraswamy talking about revivalism, saying that look back at the miniature painting tradition, revive that, and bring that into your life. And that is what Indian art should be about. So these are the four things, which are kind of taking place. And in that, you have the entry or the discovery of Ajanta, and how that becomes, a significant force that becomes almost to a point of obsession for many artists. I'll take you through that process. But before we do that, I want to again kind of contextualize it too. Gauri just gave a very beautiful and a simple explanation of what is Ajanta. So this is, just to kind of reiterate, these are caves which are in Western Maharashtra. These are caves that are not natural, but they're excavated caves by people by using a hammer, chisel, whatever were the tools, and they were carved out from mountain faces. There are 30 caves done in two phases. The first phase was 2nd century BCE. There was a pause in between. The second phase starts around the 4th century CE in the Common Era, and it kind of, continues till about the 6th century CE. And then it stops abruptly. This has chaityas and viharas. Chaityas are the praying or the temple spaces, meditation spaces, and viharas are staying spaces. This complex of caves has not only murals, but also sculpture and phenomenal architectural elements. So even today, when you go and visit the caves, they kind of put you in awe and make you wonder, what were these people thinking? What went on in their minds? So as a monument, and of course, it's recognized by UNESCO, it's a World Heritage Site. That is about Ajanta. So is the subject matter interesting to artists? Is it the sculptural style? There are multiple layers to it, but the most strong, dominant thing that has caught the attention of people across the globe is the style of the painting and the murals, especially given the time that was created in. Now I come to the question. I keep using the word, or you saw the word modern art in the title. Just to clarify and to set it within the time frame that I'm talking about, modern art, for when I refer to it today specifically, and even in otherwise, refers to a historical period. Yeah, it is something that occurred at a particular time in history. The earliest, I'll explain why I'm saying the earliest documented, use for art is 1850. And in India, it kind of comes into play in about, say the 1930s or 1920s onward, right up to the 1960s, 40 years of what we identify from the perspective of art history, which is identified as a modern art period. This art particular period that we refer to as modern does not have a style or a subject, but it is an attitude that artists adopted. What was this attitude? Why was it so different? Basically, it goes hand in hand with the change in lifestyle, the change in the way people lived. Wherever there was modernization, that is of our cities, where industrialization happens, people start living in urban centers, you have different modes of communication, you start dressing differently, education changes, your tools and technologies changes. Like, for instance, the railway, the coming of the railway, introduction of camera are markers or technologies that changed forever the way artists would be looking at art or the way people looked around themselves. So in India, modernization comes in a little later. So the modern art that follows it will happen later. Similarly, if in say in Egypt, modernization happens at a different time, modern art over there will follow as per that. So in different countries, it happens at different time periods. It's not something that is, a hard and fast rule for it. Also, like I said, it's not, there's no unifying factor in terms of style or in subject. It's a broad attitudinal change that kind of takes place. Having set the context, now I'll kind of move on to the next part of it. The two paintings, of course, just to take a moment, what you have on the left tab for Ajanta is the most famous Bodhisattva, Padmapani, which again I'm going to talk about a little later, but the subjects that deal with are all Buddhist, the Jatak Kathas, the life of the Buddha, that you see across in multiple caves. And the paint is a canvas, and that's his interpretation or his depiction of the caves. He's made a painting, the landscape of where you find the Ajanta caves. For those of you who've been there will realize that it's a the U horse-shaped curve along the river where the caves are kind of nestled on the mountain, the mountain which is there. I'll take you through a chronology of the documentation and how there's a change in the documentation also that happens. The first person to document the Ajanta, the murals of the Ajanta, was an army officer called John Smith. John Smith was the army officer who rediscovered the caves in the year 1890. He realized that this is something unusual and, a momentous discovery. He reports it. The moment it gets reported, there is a need or there is a directive that's given to Major Robert Gill to copy it and to make a note of what the plans and the murals which are there. Because even at that time, because of years of neglect, there was a decay, and the murals were kind of distorted, destroyed. Parts of it had come off. What the image that you see on the left is, one half of it, which is the actual mural. And what did Robert Gill copy, or how did he make the replica of it? So he kind of, paints over, he completes the picture. And this is what is called as, done through his perspective, and it's not as true to the original. And I'll show you why it means, what do I mean by saying that it's not so true to the original? But what happens is he does about 27 to 30 paintings. They're taken back to England, they're displayed, but there's a fire, and after the exhibition, they're all destroyed. But in the time that it was destroyed, whoever saw it was completely taken in by the quality of work, by what they were seeing, and it triggered a reaction amongst people who wanted to come, see, document, and understand this. Why was that? Because all this while, all that they saw for art from India was sculpture, temple, phenomenal works of craft, which was in silver, or the textiles. They always claimed and said that India did not have a tradition of making paintings. They did not understand how to do painting. This discredited all the claims that were made thus far, and they had to relook at the way art from India was kind of being positioned. And this becomes something that everybody wants to study and understand in great detail, which is why immediately as in, after a gap of 10 years, the principal at GG School of Art, John Griffiths, who was trained in England, was again commissioned to make the copies. So he went to Ajanta. He went along with a group of students, 7 students. That's all that we have. And the names keep varying as to how many students, who the students were. But what I have found are these names, which is Pestamji Bamanji, who goes on to become a very famous portrait salon painter, Jagannath Anand, Jayaraj Raghoba, and Narayan Pushpa. No information is available on any of these artists, but this is, from 1872 to about a period of 8 years that he went on to make the copies. These copies were again made into a publication, with a large kind of a publication. I studied at the GJ School of Art, and this particular publication was always kept in the archival section. And we were never allowed to even go near it because it was so fragile and delicate and important at that particular point in time. That's one printed copy. The originals were sent and they were displayed again in an exhibition. And again, unfortunately, there was a fire and they were destroyed. And, seriousness aside, this seems to be a trend for most of the Ajanta copies that were made. The first one gets destroyed in fire. The second one, which is commissioned to, salvage and to kind of document, again gets destroyed in a fire. There's another instance where it goes and there's another natural calamity and it gets destroyed. So there's obviously, it makes for some interesting storytelling over there. But apart from that, the point that I'm trying to make is that everybody understood the significance of the works, and there were constantly copies that were made. Initially, it was by Europeans, it was by people who were not within the country, who were looking at them and making copies. Yes, artists or students from the college were involved, but they were more as, young interns kind of making these copies and putting them. Some of the original copies are there in the Victoria and Albert Museum today. If you go and look at, online, you will be able to see them. Some of them are documented and available for free access and download also. I now come to the, another important moment of the copying process of Ajanta. In England, there used to be a society called the Society, I'm forgetting the name, but it's Indian Society for the promotion of or the documentation of the culture and heritage, which was Lady Christiana Herringham was a part of that. She had come in 1907 to India and seen the Ajanta caves, and she felt that it was imperative that they be documented again. Why did she feel that? Because she could see the decay that was happening, and she felt that this is not only important for the people of India, but for the people of world to be able to see the beautiful work that was done. So she gathers enough money because it required a lot of money to, kind of come spend that amount of time, travel to Ajanta. And traveling to Ajanta at that time was not considered safe. There were accounts of saying that how, there were robbers along the way, and that you have to be careful as to how you traveled. But yet she undertook this project and the mission. And she went to, interestingly, not to JJ School of Art, because, Ajanta being in Maharashtra and the western part of India, that would have been a natural choice. She chooses to go to, Shantiniketan, because again, her connections were with Sister Nivedita. And Sister Nivedita was a very strong proponent of revival of culture of India, believed that it had, all things past had to be celebrated and, protected. So she connects Lady Herringham to Rabindranath Tagore, who then appoints Nandalal Bose, who was a student at that particular point in time, or just at the cusp of kind of he was not a student. He along with the other students kind of joined Lady Herringham into this mission in 1909 to come to Ajanta and make copies of the paintings. All the artists that I've listed over here, Nandalal Bose, Asit Kumar Haldar, Samarendranath Gupta, Syed Ahmed, and Muhammad Fazuluddin, though their assignment at that particular point in time was only to kind of document and make copies, they imbibed this and kind of, brought it into their works and kind of took it further in a very different format. But this again becomes something that is so important that she takes it back. There are exhibitions that are held, and again, some of the works are lost, but a large chunk of them is kind of stored and published, and it goes across the globe. The interest over here for these people, the second point of interest is, apart from the aesthetics of it, is that these are Buddhist subject matters. It talks about the life of Buddha, the Jatak Kathas, and it resonates with them on that level also, and it gets well documented and circulated. I now start with individual contributions that happened. And they're very interesting stories that kind of come across. Asit Kumar Haldar, after his first kind of foray into Ajanta as a student, he goes back again because he says that, you know, the the power of the works was so immense on me that I could not let go. And he, on his own, funds his own, trip over there, spends time, understands the works, and starts painting in that manner. So what you see over here on the left is not a copy of the Ajanta, but it's a subject that he, devises, or he makes, and he paints it in the style of Ajanta. It's very easy to mistake it for something as a copy of Ajanta because of the kind of columns, the clothes that are worn, the style of furniture. But it is not a a thing from Ajanta because of certain things like the curtain which is there, the Brahmin which is seated over here. And this is not a part of the subject from Ajanta, though it talks about Queen Prabhavati, but it's his interpretation using the Ajanta style. And then he also does something that is very interesting, and which happens with another artist also. He publishes a book called the Ajanta, which is in Bengali in 1913. Now, as we know, the power of the book is quite strong, and it would spread across. People would read about it. And what does he do? He reproduces images in black and white and in color. He talks about the context, the history of Ajanta, and he also does analysis of the works, being an artist, as to what is the composition, composition, what are the color values, and stuff like that. So that's one important kind of first step by an Indian artist that's already starting to take place from the year 1913. Then we have another artist who's again also another point to note is that Asit Kumar Haldar was the grandnephew of Rabindranath Tagore, and you know the lineage that it's coming from. You know the kind of impact he would have had. His works were also exhibited in London. Then we have Mukul Dey. Mukul Dey, though not part of the group of artists who went with Lady Herringham, was somebody who was extremely close to Rabindranath Tagore. So much so that when Rabindranath Tagore went to Japan for the first time, he took along Mukul Dey with him, who was a very young man at that point, so that he gets exposed, to different experiences of life, experiences different cultures, and he was self-taught at that particular point in time. But then he starts making paintings, and his work gets exposed to artists in Japan. Then he's also sent to the United States of America to learn printmaking. And Mukul Dey is one of the pioneers in printmaking. That's a separate story of his life. But the Ajanta has a great impact on him. When his father had passed away, to find peace and to find ease of mind and to kind of, introspect, he chose Ajanta. And he travels all the way from Calcutta to Ajanta. And it's not an easy journey to take, but he makes that. The first time round that he comes, he spends a very short amount of time, say a few weeks, and then he goes back. And whatever he earns from his work as an artist by making portraits or by taking commissions, he saves that money. And then after 2 years, he comes back to Ajanta and he spends, months at end documenting, making copies, studying, understanding. And when he comes back, he publishes a book, and it calls it, because he calls it My Pilgrimages to Ajanta and Bagh, and this is in the year 1925. Now, it is in his records that we know, or it kind of becomes very apparent as to how did they do these copies. What they did was, and he documents it in great detail. It's also there in the other documentations, but his is interesting for me because what happens is that it's through an Indian artist and how he does the documentation that we get a sense of it. They actually took tracing paper, like rolls of tracing paper, which was like, he says he's very careful. He uses beeswax because he doesn't want to kind of disturb the murals which are there. Sticks, leaves them down like a curtain, and with a pencil, he traces them out. And he says, I learned this technique from a Japanese artist. There's another side story that comes in over here. There was a Japanese artist that Rabindranath Tagore had invited to Shantiniketan to teach the students of Shantiniketan how to make paintings in Japanese style. The name of that artist was Arai Kampo. Arai Kampo then visits Ajanta because he's a Buddhist and he knows there are Buddhist paintings of the Buddha and the Jatak Katha. And there's another Japanese artist who's come with his camera to photograph and document, and Arai Campo wants to make these tracings. He's on a very short time period, so he quickly comes, and Mukul Dey looks at him as to how he's doing the copies. And when he comes back, second time round, he uses that technique and he makes these copies. Those copies then get exhibited in London. Some of them are there again in the Victoria and Albert Museum. Only a few images are available, not all. And then he publishes a book. Now, this is a second artist who's not an art historian, who is publishing books on Ajanta from the perspective of what it means for an artist to do something like that. But interestingly enough, his art, which he does as portraits or anything else, you don't see so much of an impact in terms of color or style, which is there. It kind of remains as a fascination for him, and he does very different works. I now come to the last part of the Shantiniketan influence. We have a very beautiful quote by Rabindranath Tagore, which is, one only has to visit the caves of Ajanta to see the capturing uh, through the eye of the artist of his vision of unity. And now we know why so many artists from Shantiniketan, from Calcutta were visiting. What I've shown over here, these three images. One is, of course, an image of a border of the ceiling from the Ajanta murals. And the other two images are, images from the Constitution of India. That's I hope most of you would have seen this, because the original Constitution of India had paintings made by Nandalal Bose and his students for each of the sections of the Constitution. And it traces the legacy of the country. It starts from, it's a beautiful interpretation of those times in paintings. And this particular one, I felt, is the closest to what you see in the Ajanta murals. And of course, look at the comparison between the flower blooms over here to the borders of the Constitution. And the Constitution, of course, was done by Nandalal Bose around the year 1948, 1949. He'd been to Ajanta in the year 1909 to 1911. It almost after 30 years, the impact is so strong that he can recall it and put it in. And for Nandalal Bose, there's no direct kind of comparison that we can have between his style, but the Ajanta had a great impact on him, in terms of the line, in terms of the way you use color and composition. These are three things that, artists have absorbed and assimilated in their work. And this, I thought, was a great way of, kind of closing the loop. Because if you remember, I began by saying that Ajanta is important because it helps you answer, or it kind of comes in between the whole thing of what is nationalism, what is the identity. Those two ends, which is either it is not painting Indian subjects and in a European academic style, or it is not only looking at miniature paintings, but it is imbibing, understanding, absorbing, assimilating, and creating something that answers to what Indian identity was then or even today. And that's where Ajanta kind of fills in that gap, gives the artist the right tools to develop and build on that. The artist has managed to remain true to his vision, to his style, and at the same time, bring in the heritage, the long legacy which was left behind by the painters of Ajanta. That is, again, I repeat them and I'll keep repeating them, which is, the control over light, the understanding of color, and composition. Because composition is not just about making a picture look realistic, but to tell multiple layers of stories through those things. And Nandalal Bose kind of captures and manages to do that brilliantly, in the Constitution. It's such a simple looking book, such simple looking things, but it is loaded and you can unravel and look at them, and it's something that's just quite phenomenal. And now come to somebody else, this becomes your modern part. This becomes when artists are really, really kind of pushing it, to different limits. And I begin with Ganesh Haloy. Ganesh Haloy, Gauri kind of had mentioned in the beginning, like how the Archaeological Survey of India, how arts works with the Archaeological Survey of India and kind of brings in Ajanta again. We're talking 1957, 10 years into independence. Um, you know, uh, do you think a young artist will still be concerned about, an identity? What does it mean? Yes, that question continues to bother artists today. Not bother, but kind of, it plays on their psyche. And he has this opportunity because Ganesh Haloy, um, uh, you know, in that particular time, there was a lot of dissonance that was happening. How does a nation kind of provide opportunities for an artist? Because unlike today, in 1957, artists would not have had galleries or museums or exhibitions to kind of, showcase their work. And yet, they were making works, they were kind of dealing with these tough questions. He gets an opportunity to work with the Archaeological Survey of India, and he gets sent to Ajanta. The country is still documenting Ajanta because there's so much that needs to be done, and everybody wants to have a record. There, he kind of is completely, again, no guesses for what I'm going to say, enamored, raptured, taken in by what he sees over there. This is his copy of one of the paintings in Ajanta. She's called the Dark Princess. He does all of these works, and then when he starts his practice, he begins with landscapes, and the landscapes gradually evolve into what you see over here, which is abstract. You may say, Yamini, where do you see the correlation between something like this to, an abstract work or a non-representational work? But if you think about it, if you sleep over this image and recall this image in a day or two or whenever, you will see it. Because there's a sense of rhythm, the way the forms are kind of laid out, the understanding of color. Imagine using yellow with ultramarine blue. It's not easy, but he manages it. The way he composes it, the way he brings in color effortlessly, can only happen for somebody who understands how color plays out in a larger composition. What is balance? What is composition? These are things that have helped him build his art practice without the use of form, without the use of subject. And that becomes something that's so, so important. And interestingly, I've been looking at his works for decades, and I've always enjoyed his work. That's a personal choice. But this connection with Ajanta and ASI was somewhere kind of, ignored or lost in my brain. Last year, I saw a retrospective exhibition of his in Delhi. And it was like a moment for me where I was like, I took a step back. I said, oh my God, I didn't realize that he had done so many copies, and Ajanta was also part of his repertoire. And then everything in my head started making sense, saying that, okay, this is where the colors are coming from. This is the composition, and everything kind of, fell in place for me. Uh, I hope you guys also have similar kind of experience. And if you look at his works and do a little bit of back and forth, sure, it will be great fun to do this exercise. Then I come to, as an art student, we were always told about this particular painting and how Amrita Shergill was, one of the pioneers of looking at Ajanta. But as I've just showed, that she is one of the many artists who turned to Ajanta and looked at Ajanta. There were many before her also who did this. So Amrita Shergill, just a minute on her life. Part Hungarian, part Sikh, studied in Paris, was a fantastic artist, but didn't find, that her resonance or her key that she wanted to work on. So she comes back to India. She stays in Shimla. Her works in Shimla usually, gray, very composed, very static kind of works. Then she decides to go on this tour of India and says, I want to know my country, and I want to know who, how the art and architecture is. And it was a temple tour that she wanted to do. When she comes to Bombay, Kal Kandalwala tells her that she must go to Ajanta. Guess who accompanies her? It's an artist called K.K. Hebar, who I began with. He accompanies her to Ajanta, and that's where they both kind of discover the beauty of Ajanta. And then she says, oh, this is, the true art of India. They have understood line, which are valid points. She kind of reiterates that the artist of Ajanta knows what is line and what is the power of line, what is the power of color and composition. And she does this painting much after she's finished her tour, which is called as a bride's toilet, and it hangs in the National Gallery of Modern Art in Delhi. Now, here it becomes easier to kind of explain the influence of Ajanta on on an artwork or an artist, because here I can talk about, look at the line of her arm. It's a beautiful line. Or if you just zero in on the face, the eyes, the eyebrows, everything kind of is, you know, rhythmic. It's well coordinated. If you look at eyes of all the figures here, it is again something, that there's a connection in it. It's a well thought through composition. It's not something random. Every element in this work has been planned and placed to make meaning, to guide the eye. The colors are bright. It's an oil on canvas. So she uses earthy tones and it becomes very bright and beautiful painting. And that kind of remains in her work. And she kind of, this is a shift, from the kind of works that she did earlier, which was very impressionistic. Think Degas, think, water lilies. That's the kind of work that she had, to doing something like that, that is very simplified and not emphasizing too much on, making it look realistic in terms of musculature or the body structure. Now I come to the last artist that I'm going to be spending a little bit more time on, because uh, th- you know, not many artists have taken in or uh, lived with Ajanta to that extent. They were there, they did fantastic stuff, and they moved on. But here's an artist, sorry, there's a typo in the name that I've written. It's not Solangarkar, it's Solegaonkar. I will correct it and I'll send it in the chat later. Who, who was an artist who was from Indore. He studied at the JJ School of Art, and he, you know, he kind of was successful in his works. His one of his paintings, which is called woman who was Mahari, wins a gold medal with the Bombay Art Society. There is recognition, but at the same time, there is this hunger in him to find out something more. To look at what is it that an artist can paint, or what is it that art should do. And for him, the solution comes in form of Ajanta. And I've been blessed and lucky enough to meet with his family, his daughter particularly, who shared very interesting stories, where he chose to go to Ajanta at a point in time in his life when he was married, he had children, but his family, his wife, and they took the decision that if Ajanta means so much to him and if he wants to study Ajanta, they lived separately, and he went and he lived in Ajanta for a number of years, of course, coming back and forth between the city. And what did he do? He completely kind of, demystified, destructured everything that was there to Ajanta. How did he do that? One of the first things that is easy to talk about, or an easy getaway into the works, is that he studied color. They were all natural pigments that have survived, you know, uh, centuries of neglect, and yet you still get a sense of the richness, the luminosity of it. So what was that color? It began as with something as simple as that. He went going around the places, the mountains, the forests, the land around it, picking up stones, picking up, uh, different kind of soils, and experimenting and actually making the colors. And what you see on the left is his palette. You see the pigments, the dry pigments. He would take the pigments, he would use binders onto it, and he would make the color. And what you see on the right is, of course, there are tubes also over here, but I think that's just for an aesthetic thing. But you look at the thing on the left, And that's how he built his color palette. And he would make his own pigment, color, and paint on it. And there's a difference in the paintings. Here is a study where you see two women. The subject of the painting is not that critical over here, but what is important is that this painting has these color swatches, it is a study, color swatches. So I've got these images directly from the family um, of which pigment corresponds or which pigment goes in there. Why is that important? I think it helps artists not only art historians or anybody who's interested in knowing the history of how an artist painted or what went into the painting. This is, brilliant material to look at, to study, to understand. And for an artist to be able to so conscious and to do this in a methodical manner is again something that's quite rare within our country. There are very few artists who do that, and he's one of them. So it actually tells you his thought process, his methodology that he went into it, and how he achieved the effect over here with these, colors. Which then brings me to, the second part, which I keep talking about, the line, the composition. What you see on the top is a painting which is, clear, easy to understand. It's a procession. He's looked at how compositions or how compositionally paintings in or murals in Ajanta would have been done. And it's a large piece that he's done, which is great. Cut short to this, which is again, comparison between these two. Though the one at the bottom has no figures, no narrative going on, but still, what struck me was that compositionally, the way he has arranged the forms, the way he's placed the colors, it resonates what is happening over here. What does that mean? Why am I comparing it over here? Because it shows you that the artist has understood the underlying principles of how do you compose a painting, how do you plan your color palette, how do you structure the whole thing so that it becomes one single unit to create a unifying experience. And this is something so critical and so important because, again, a point that I didn't mention more or didn't want to begin with, and which I brought up in between, was that this whole idea, which was there at the turn of the century, that art in India was all to do with grotesque, that was all to do with multiple arms. They had no sense, or there was no concept of fine art. They were great at craft. They were great at the architecture, grudgingly, and sculpture. They said, but they lack painting, and so there is no concept of fine art. And this is what goes to prove that, you know, there were people or artists who were thinking, who were aware of what it means to make composition. Because again, what we have to understand is the scale, right? These are not canvases or works on paper, but they are walls, floor to ceiling. And, the first cave itself, like it's chock-a-block with paintings. Paintings that make sense, paintings that continue to hold you, mesmerize you. And that would have been possible only when you have a rock solid base understanding of composition, which also made people think about what is the document that would have existed, which led into aesthetics, which led into writing about the theory. Of course, you have the Natya Shastra, you have the Chitra Sutras, the Shilpa Sutras, but nowhere do you find like a textbook version of the Ajanta saying that, Acha, this is what you need to do for painting. There are references, allusions to it, but no interestingly enough, no direct reference to how they would have painted or what would have guided them. And I think that is what kind of got an artist like Solegaonkar wondering and trying to dig deeper into understanding that. It is only when you understand the complexity of the paintings which is there in Ajanta that you start to take a pause, you start to study them, and you start to understand them. And once you understand the underlying principles which go into the making of the paintings of Ajanta, which is composition, I'm sorry to go on again and again about it, but these are the facts. I mean, once you understand how they were composed, how the form or a line holds it all, holds the composition together, the ease of the line and the balance of the colors, is then when it becomes that much more powerful. Otherwise, it's easy to say, oh, the beautiful Bodhisattva Padmapani or the Dark Princess or the flying things. These are individual elements that kind of come in. But the true power of Ajanta, whoever's understood it, has completely changed the way, and it comes through in everything that they've done, be it figurative, long narrative compositions or abstract, non-figurative works, it still comes through. And that happens across the works of Solegaonkar. So over here, he's taken it a step further. He brings in his own stories and interpretations and own subjects. So, you know, Apsara who's dancing. And he manages to kind of create almost a surreal, if I can say so, experience of these two women who are here and who are dancing, and yet have the hold of this is from Ajanta, you cannot mistake it. Or when he does this Bodhisattva, look at the way he's kind of, scaled up the figure, the bold red which comes into the background. Uh, all difficult things, but he manages to compose it and bring it forward, in a phenomenal way, which is there. I'll just go back again. I skipped talk. I got so excited about talking about it. There's another thing which is here, which is, posters for India. This happened a lot. And one of the, corporates or the companies that has used Ajanta a lot is Air India. They've used it or the railways. I think this poster is for Railways See India, where they commissioned him to make a poster of talking about the beauty of Ajanta and how he's changed he's got the original figure but created in a very different manner. There was an aircraft that was, had a complete interior which was done by Ajanta. So the power of Ajanta is quite pervasive, not only for artists, but even for corporates. What is, now I come to, what does it mean today? Uh, Gauri mentioned at the beginning saying that even today it continues to be a part of the art world and the artist world, but in a very different manner, where it is spoken about as what I was talking about in terms of the impact that it had on artists, the significance of it, not as just only the subject matter or from religion, but in terms of the process, for a lack of better word, production. Sorry, but what to do? How do I talk about these things? So it is, how did they go about doing this? The questions that it raises, and also, uh, interestingly, this is a conservation of the copy that was made by Griffith. So, for conservation techniques, also in terms of the changing perspectives of how Europe perceived India or India's contribution to fine art, and how Ajanta changes that and how it becomes completely different, how artists look at it. So, art historically, there's enough information that is being, or discussions that is being done. Why is that important? Because if you would have realized in my my presentation also, I brought up two artists who've published books. That is very critical for people to know about it, to talk about it, and to continue to do work. It's one thing when art historians or archaeologists or historians talk about it, the focus is very different. But when it comes from an artistic perspective, an artist looks at it or an art historian talks about it, it becomes slightly more specialized and different, and it talks about the values that it brings in art, and how that can be impacted, or how it can help you navigate the whole question of what does it mean as an artist? How do you treat with your past? It helps you navigate those questions also. Now I come to the last part of it. I'm sorry, I didn't check the time. I think we're doing good on time, right, Badri?
We are fine. We are fine.
Yeah. Just tell me when I need to kind of stop, then I will stop, and then we can.
We have time. You can go ahead.
Okay. Just about how much time do I have? Then I will plan this last section accordingly.
We can go up to 7 o'clock. We do have some, uh, you know, a Q&A session. We have not received questions, but I have lots of questions to talk to
Okay.
you about.
I'll take about 10 minutes on this last
Sure,
part.
sure, sure.
We can, I think it's always nice if you have questions and that takes into a different
Yes.
dimension altogether. So, so far I've been speaking about visual art, painting, artists, but I want to end with dance and Uday Shankar. Why Uday Shankar? Because I think his story is so interesting. So Uday Shankar goes to London to study at the Royal Academy to be a painter. That's how he begins. But his teacher, William Rothenstein, realizes that, there's more that he can do, or he can do something different. And he's not a trained dancer, but dance is something that appeals to him. So he starts, he does, he takes part in a performance, Oriental dance, problematic term, but it's still there. And he does this. He gets noticed by Anna Pavlova, who says, let him be the part, of my troupe. And of course, permissions are taken, discussions happen, and his professor Rothenstein feels that he's far more suited for dance than for visual art, be it painting or sculpture. And there begins his journey for dance. Now, what happens is that this is he's born in 1900. He's in in the Royal Academy during the later part of or around his 20s. After he's undertaken this journey and around the mid-20s, he comes back to India. Why does he do that is something that I've wondered, because this was the time period when there was so much of curiosity and interest in all things exotic, for a lack of better word, all things Indian. There were dancers, art historians, thinkers who were coming in and looking at what was happening in India and becomes a point of inspiration. When he comes back to India, he again does this thing as a tour of India to understand the culture. And he kind of goes and studies, I wouldn't say study, but he becomes a part of the whole, the festivals that happen around temples, the dance performances or the performances or the rituals, dances of the Adivasis which are there. He also takes up Kathakali, as an important form. He looks at it, and these are all documented. And Ajanta becomes a part of his journey. And over there, I think he finds a lot of inspiration, and he's kind of documented that, say, be it for not only for the apparent reasons of costume, jewelry, but also movement. Because his dance movement, because he's not a trained dancer, is not guided by, methodology, but he begins to kind of evolve from that particular language, and he incorporates that into his own style. The other person, I think, who plays a great role in what he has to offer to the world as dancer, how he offers it, is an artist called Alice Boner, who's a Swiss artist who again has fascination and fascinated with India and has done a lot. I mean, her institute continues to be there in Banaras, where she kind of looks at dance and the geometry of dance, translations. And I think she would have also kind of brought in, though there's no direct connection to Ajanta from her, but to look at dance in a very structured manner and I'm sure being trained initially as a painter, these are conjectures that I'm pulling up, as a painter, he would have understood the inherent geometry which is there in Ajanta and incorporated it in his dance form. And he is kind of evolving and building these things, as he does these performances, largely in Europe, between Paris, Switzerland, Austria, and also then later on across the United States of America. And it becomes this kind of, I think this picture sums it up so beautifully, and the contrasting picture right at the top. Uh, you know, it it becomes a life, it's almost as if the murals become a source of inspiration for him, for the dance. And then for me, it sums up beautifully because I began with artists who look at Ajanta, which is so full of movement, line, form, and color. And then we end the talk with a dancer who began his journey as an artist but moved into dance, and then how Ajanta kind of, gives him the lens to look at it, in terms of composition that can be brought to life. And I think today, if I go out looking for direct, apparent connections between Ajanta and any form of art, it's not that, how should I say, obvious. It may be there, but it's not obvious. Uh, and I think that's par for the course. That's the times that kind of we live in. But somewhere, the transformations or it kind of comes down, it seeps into the visual language unknowingly, and it becomes part of our language. And that is something that needs to be studied and looked at in greater detail, because there are lots. I mean, what I have shared today is just one part of it. There are many more artists, there are many more people who've done different stories about it. But this becomes, today's presentation is kind of giving you a very broad view of what the impact is, or how the artists have navigated uh, you know the presence of Ajanta in their work through different exchanges, be it of being a student making copies or going on your own as individual artist and making the studies. Uh, then the studies kind of, if you look at it, have been part of it. Like in the case of Asit Kumar Haldar, he takes in the literal form, the way the figures are, the way colors are. He continues that language. He continues, in a literal manner. But if you look at somebody like Mukul De, it becomes something that is part of his personality, not his art. Or Ganesh Haloy, where he takes it to the next level, he imbibes it and takes it, it becomes a lived experience for him. Or somebody like Solegaonkar, who, does it both. He does the literal, factual understanding of Ajanta by deciphering the colors, by making the colors, by, I've had the opportunity to look at his sketchbooks, beautiful sketches which are there, pencil sketches, looking at composition, looking at the structure of the work. And he does both. He does a literal kind of an interpretative composition, and then there are those phenomenal, long, non-representational compositions that kind of come into his work, which carry the language of Ajanta into his works. And I think it becomes a holistic, I hope it kind of gives you a sense of how Ajanta can influence artists depending on what their perception is, what their mental makeup is, or what their ultimate vision for their art is, and how Ajanta has kind of come in different ways, and yet, you know, uh, you be true to those forms that the artists have created. And also, when it comes to dance, I'm not even getting into textiles or fashion design, jewelry. That deserves its own kind of, space and platform to talk about. But here, this becomes, your top, uh, how should I say, the bold, the more attractive kind of interventions with Ajanta. And, I also feel, I think this is something that I need to do for myself. We keep talking about the murals of Ajanta. Of course, they're powerful. Of course, they're beautiful. But the sculpture also is so stunning. The sculptures over there have a presence. They're large, large and only on their own kind of Buddhas, Bodhisattvas which are standing. Then there are certain walls where it is like f- frenzied activity which is there in them. Different kinds of figures. I'm sure, people have looked at that also. Sorry, I need to kind of, I always feel that there's so much more that I need to look at, study, and kind of enjoy. That is another journey which is there, because Ajanta is not only the murals, right? Ajanta is the sculpture. It is also the pillars. It is also the architecture. It is everything put together. And this is just one part of it that I've kind of, one little sliver that I have put out over here. I think I now would want to have some conversation and, something that to kind of take it to a different language. Otherwise, I keep talking and then it becomes a monologue, and that's not nice. So I'm done with my presentation. And if there's any ideas, things, happy to kind of take them up. So I'm going to stop the screen share.
Yes. Just give us a minute. I will add. Yes. Um, I do have probably a few hundred questions, but I will start with a question from one of our viewers with whom I was having a furious conversation on dating of the second phase of Ajanta.
Mm,
Your focus of the talk is, post Ajanta in a sense.
mm,
I would like to bring it here where Shubha Kandekar
mm,
wants to know what is the basis of dating of second phase of Ajanta. That's the first part of the question. So we'll
mm.
first take it up, and then I will have other questions of her.
Listen, heads up. I am modern contemporary art. I go by what I have in my sources, which gives me the dating of Ajanta. I am no expert. Walter Spink, Dr. Walter Spink has done his justice with
I
16 volumes. I don't compete with that.
I did mention Walter Spink. I mentioned given that there is an inscription of Harisena's minister there, Harisena's Vakataka ruler Harisena's time
Correct.
can be figured out, and therefore was the answer I gave. So we will leave it at that, because that's perhaps
And
maybe
that's a
others.
longer conversation, because there are so many things as to, they amongst themselves, they say, oh, it takes 5 years to do the cave. Some say 15 years to do the cave. Some
Right,
say this.
right. And Walter Spink says it all took some mere 18 years for everything.
Everything to be done.
We were fortunate actually, when we went on a site seminar,
Mm.
which Gauri alluded to at the very beginning. Every year we go to one site, and we went to Ajanta, and we had Walter Spink there at that time. I mean, we
Oh,
are talking
wow.
many, many years back. We had a conversation with him, book signing, all that. Uh, you know, uh, but we were not. I would say I certainly was not knowledgeable enough to hold a conversation at a high level about how you could come up with the date, week when they started excavating at this point, etc. So we'll leave it at that. There are a
I,
couple of other
I,
questions
yeah.
that it has. Um, One is, how the paintings were made in the dark interiors. It's
Mm.
also from Shubha Kandekar.
So there's another a theory that they use saying that they had a piece of white cloth that they would stretch and hold at the entrance of the cave from which it would reflect
Reflect
and they would,
sunlight.
correct, and they would kind of paint it with that. Then of course you have lamps and things like that. So that is, I find that the most plausible explanation to go by and say that yes, they would have done something like that.
There have been, even in the paintings of Ajanta, we can see evidence for mirror,
Mm.
metallic mirrors
Yeah,
particularly,
yeah.
not glass mirrors. So there is always a possibility of,
Reflection is
reflection of light and work within the, daylight period. But of course, limited oil lamp usage without forming the suits and other things. Excavation is one thing. Painting is the next stage, right?
correct.
In case of excavation, you could even work during the nights if you wanted to with these, with the lamps. But painting, you have to be far more careful. Okay. She also has another question, and I'm bringing them all together because
Mm.
this is first on the block to come up with questions. Do the paintings have an internal chronology as to which one was done first? Let us say that we have a cave chronology.
Yeah.
Then within the cave, is it possible for us to even identify a painting chronology? Can we even say how many painters, because from the style and the style variation, all that? I'm just extending the question.
Yeah, no, I think it's difficult to do that because how should I say? They all kind of, there are sections to it, but they kind of interweave into one another also. And it's not, I think it will take another
Yeah.
dedicated research only on that, which would be another 18 volumes.
I want to mention two artists of Tamil Nadu. Perhaps you have not studied or heard them, and not of the large scale mural painters, but there is a painter called Rajam. He was also a Carnatic musician.
Okay.
He's a very rare artist. He passed away in his 90s, few years back.
Okay.
He was a AAR employee and a top class, Carnatic singer who also happened to do amazing painting. And along with our founder, Professor Swaminathan, I have met him, interacted with him, and he was in absolute love with Ajanta. Started painting in a smaller, paper, watercolor kind of a thing. He was also doing some, calendar art or material that could go into calendars, and he started replicating the Ajanta style. This is just as a mere one-line point, and some of his paintings have been well. Preserved, I think, by somebody called Lalita Ram. I will see if I can try to get hold of some digital copies or connect you so you can take a look at them.
Oh, yes. Like I said, like these are people that have come in my purview. I'm sure there are many
Yeah, I know.
love
So
kind
you
of
were mentioning
connect.
people from Bengal, people from Mumbai and Maharashtra
Yeah.
surround, but this is the Tamil Nadu connection.
Yeah.
We also have, I would say, another one is an artist called Maniyam, who was he was doing work for magazines
Okay.
and drew a lot from. Though he was not restricted to Ajanta, he has done amazing magazine artwork for stories and historic novels and such. Not just the Ajanta style that he has brought few places. the Chalukyan Badami and Mahabalipuram, a lot of classical uh, work, and that also I will try to give you some
Yes.
connect. So I can remember these Rajam and Maniam. I am not sure whether there were others, but these are two names because of the Chennai connection and our knowledge of it. I wanted to bring it to your notice. Then
Always a
uh,
pleasure.
let's go to the Ajanta itself and questions related to that. The name E.B. Havel that you pointed out also obviously has a Chennai connection.
Of
And
course, he
the
started
name
there.
was from, yeah, he was a fine arts school here. His
Mm.
name is connected with that. Sadly, what he could achieve in Bengal, I think he couldn't really achieve in Chennai, of somebody who could bring that kind of connect with the past in terms of recreating, creating content, paintings and artwork of the classical style. Or if
Mm.
something like that had happened, we don't know the names. They are not as famous as, say, Avanindranath Tagore
Mm.
and others who came after that. Has he, how was it that, the connect with Avanindranath Tagore happened and this Bengal school even emerged? If you could just add a couple of lines there, that would be very
Yes,
useful.
absolutely. So while he was in Chennai, the Madras College of Arts and Craft, he was at a professor level. Okay, so he didn't have much of a say while he was there, and he was there for a short period of time. When he comes to Calcutta, he comes in as the principal, and at
Oh,
that particular point, he gets in power. I think that kind of helps him do that. And
Okay.
then his interactions, he has been thinking and he's been trying to do work while he was in Chennai. Sorry, I'm just going to switch on the light. Sorry.
yeah.
Sorry. So while he was in Chennai, he had very limited, power to kind of work with. And also, what you must remember is that in Chennai, the college was seen largely as an art and craft training institute.
Okay.
It didn't have so much of focus on
Fine
fine
arts.
art or painting or sculpture. It began as that, and it continued to remain as that even after independence. Only gradually, with when KCS Panikar started or DP Roy Chaudhary came in, that sculpture, painting started kind of getting into the forefront. But the the craft dominance remained.
In
So that
Chennai.
was one thing in Chennai. But that also helped him understand the whole power of craft. And Calcutta was a completely different situation over there at that particular point in time. And he meets with Abanindranath Tagore and he finds the right kind of mind who takes his ideas.
Hmm.
And the connection between the two helps him evolve and take it to the next level. So he was the one who was saying that, go back to your roots, look at revival. Abhinendranath Tagore was kind of taking it up wholeheartedly. And that's how the whole thing kind of comes into play. So, two things. One is this position within the institute, two, the orientation of the institute versus what was happening in Calcutta, which was already doing things like printmaking. There were a lot of students who were doing portraits and uh, copying European style of painting. So that shift kind of shakes up things and galvanizes it into the next level.
Okay. Okay. Um,
There was
thank
also
you.
probably an intelligentsia at that time in Calcutta. Anyway, looking at so-called Indianizing, finding our roots, etc., which
Correct.
probably was not there so much in
Correct.
Chennai, Yeah.
Correct.
Not just that, Gauri. It's
Mhm.
about an artist getting access. Intelligentsia can say anything. right? An artist has to be exposed to an Indian style and then say, hey, what have I been doing all along, right?
Yeah.
This is so amazing. See, a style is something that either you are taught and it's continuing with you as a tradition, or you have already become a matured painter coming from another tradition, but then it hits you like, hey, this is not what I want to do.
Yeah.
Nobody taught me this. Nobody showed it to me. Now that I know this, I am not going to go back to that. Right? It's something that is internal, that is changing. Of course, then the intelligentsia, the intellectuals can come and talk about why this is good, bad, how all that can happen. They can critique, they can enhance, they can maybe help in buying more of it and create a market for it, perhaps. But to the artist, it has to happen. Something has to happen to the artist.
And that shift has to happen.
It has to happen, right? Yamini ji, this whole thing about Ajanta. Firstly, let me say that I have absolutely no understanding of art enough to talk about the nuances of it or even to ask about that. But as a lay viewer, right? The large body of painting we have got only in Ajanta and nowhere else. I mean, you have some fragments here. And much later, again, as part of Tamil Heritage Trust, as we were getting exposed to all this, second reasonably large amount of painting we get actually in Tanjore,
Correct.
Brihadishwara temple,
Correct.
which has considerable painting particularly. Everything else is just mere fragments, right? There in the Pallava style fragments in Panamalai, in Kanchipuram, they are just so little to we can't make sense of it. Even the Tanjavur one, quite amazing as it is only a very small fraction compared to Ajanta in terms of volume.
Correct.
Multiple questions come there, right? In terms of painting as a communication medium, storytelling medium, which is quite different from sculpture, where we see sculpture everywhere across India.
Correct.
Right? From large, I'm now for now still restricting only to Ajanta, not coming to the later Mughal miniatures, the Rajasthani, the Pahadi, and so on, right? So I'm only restricting to the classical pre-10th century,
Correct.
where Ajanta is at such high level of advancement in terms of everything. From, if you're looking at pure painting technique itself, it has gone to such a high advance.
Yeah.
In terms of composition, storytelling, again, we're just basing it on what Professor Swaminathan, I'm sure he's now listening to this talk. He basically taught us a lot of nuances of Ajanta.
How to
Which
appreciate
are
it.
really, really interesting. And again, others have interpreted it. How do you go about trying to understand a large panel where there is, which order do we go? How do you know that one scene is ending, the other
The
scene is
other scene,
starting?
yeah.
Right? The position of a horse and the direction in which it is looking. There's just so much that, a common prop between two scenes, perspective, which the Westerners thought Indians
Lacked.
didn't really have, right? So much. How is it that that there seems to be either a huge discontinuity, or can we say that every bit got lost to the extent that only thing that we find is a bit of Tanjore, the Chola period, and nothing else. I mean, we can talk about Chittanavasal. I mean, from our understand the bits of Tamil Nadu, nothing compared to the volume and details and depth and coverage that we are seeing.
This is
What
something.
actually happened? How did it all vanish?
I wish I had an insight into that. What I have is only, you know, theories that come up in discussions.
Okay.
These are not even peer-reviewed, verified kind of discussions, but they've been there. I think one is, something that we don't like to accept, but we need to acknowledge is, like you said, the material life of it, right?
Mm.
There's nothing that you can do about it. I come from the world of art where you have, if it's a painting on canvas, it is expected to have a life of 500 years, as opposed to something which is on paper can last for about 200 years, because it is a material, and the material will disintegrate. It cannot last forever. So we have to accept that. Now, which brings me to the question, and always, why did Ajanta survive? Look at it the other way. Why did Ajanta survive? Not anything else. Because if you look at Pithalkhora, which is like just, about less than 100 kilometers away from Ajanta, it has, it is the precursor to Ajanta. So it has a few examples which remain. Or, what happens to the caves in Zunnar, which is again in the same western region. Why you don't have that? You have plain walls, but why is it not there? So I think, which brings to another controversial or a much debated question. Maybe Ajanta was abandoned, it was never used. Because it was never in use and it was abandoned, there was no wear and tear, and it survived. It may sound too simplistic and oversimplified, but that could be one way to look at it. And I don't think, there's anything to do in terms of saying that painting is lesser or painting is not important or sculpture is greater. Because I don't think that bias exists. If it was, then you wouldn't have had Ajanta or Bagh or even Tanjore for that matter, right? It's just that my mind boggles at that as to why or what could be the thing, because you do have examples across the country, but again in bits and pieces. You have the Himalayan murals which are there in some of the temples over there. It exists, but it's just that it's not well maintained or it's not studied, and that could be one of the reasons why it's there.
Yeah, I wanted to say one thing. It's not a question, actually. It's just an observation. When you were talking about Ajanta art and the flowing lines and the color and composition, one thing that really struck me about the Ajanta paintings was the use of architectural elements. The way they have used windows and balconies and gateways to, in fact, as he was saying, when you transcend from one scene to the other in a painting or, as a frame of reference, so beautifully used, and if you think that in some way Ajanta paintings are representation of the society, then it's amazing that architects viewed their elements the same way then as we do today. Today we talk of a gateway as a space of transition, or a window as a connect between outside and inside, or balcony as a semi-open space. The same way they have been used in the paintings then, which kind of is amazing, which really makes you understand that this is really a continuous thing that has been there all along.
Absolutely.
And
Absolutely.
that's what I found most fascinating about the Ajanta painting. So I just wanted to tell you that.
Yeah.
In a sort of continuation to my question, we are very used to a linear storytelling in the sculptural model. It's either a frame, right, or sequence of frames, particularly in the miniature Chola sculptures. Entire Ramayana has been narrated. You can follow it. It's like it is not out of order. It's a very precise order. Starts with the birth of Rama, and then you go to the next scene, so much so that you can actually, little kids can be taught to really follow and understand.
Yeah.
Quite a few temples in Tamil Nadu at the Chola, the 9th, the 10th, particularly 10th and 11th century, they have this miniature panels which are about 3 inches by 5 inches Okay. In the Ajanta paintings, even though that could have been easily done by the artist,
Mm.
they don't do that. I
Correct.
mean, when there are just two scenes, you can sort of figure out. But the moment they go to 5, 10, and the whole wall, uh, the way they have used, is that something very unique in the world, or it's something that other cultures have also tried something in this kind of a direction?
It's real non-linear narration as they talk
I
today
mean, I
about the
don't know whether you
movies.
call it non-linear or there is a sort of well-defined method, but it must be something that when they are doing it, they're
Mm.
doing it for a audience.
Mm.
Whether it's an audience of one or audience of 10 or million, they assume that the audience will be able to understand this,
Correct.
right? Which means there is a shared idiom somewhere.
Yeah. So, it's interesting that you bring this up. Immediately what came to my mind is that in pre-Renaissance,
Uh-huh.
if you look at Masaccio's painting or any mural painting within a chapel or a chapels, largely not so much of a cathedral, a chapel or a personal thing,
Okay.
they're always non-linear. You look at it, you have to know the story to be able to tell. This is the first because there's a story of the Saint of Francis of Assisi. So he's there in three parts. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
they're in three different areas, groups of people around him, and some things are happening. If you look at it, you will think there are three saints with three different groups.
Okay.
But it's only if you know the story, so he's coming in from here, then this happened over here, and then he went, somewhere over here. So Masaccio does that, Giotto does that. A lot of the pre-Renaissance paintings, but how they could do that or why they did that? Because those things would be narrated. They didn't know how to read. The
Mm.
story was being told and they were imagining it. And they
Okay.
were kind of understanding it basis on that. Because for them, it was again, this was a time when art was kind of making a comeback into public spaces after being kind of saying that, oh, art is bad, you cannot make the representation of man in art. And over there, if they made it look real life like, then that would be a problem. So
Mm.
used to be done in any sort of manner in the way that the artist felt fit to fill that space up.
Okay.
This is also there in where else did I see it? No, I'm the most precise example is the pre-Renaissance Italian
Paintings,
paintings
chapel, particularly chapel.
by Giotto, and they're large scale paintings, and you'll see it over there. And the
Okay.
other thing is, again, it comes back to India, is what you have on the medallions
Right.
That is
in
about the start. Yeah.
because of lack of space, everything kind of comes in, and only if you know the story, you know.
Yeah. The only thing is that in the medallions, particularly if we are talking about some of the Amaravati medallions,
Mm,
you have at most two scenes or rarely three scenes,
mm.
because that's all that you could do. And when you are restricting it to 2 to 3 scenes, you can figure out in a sense in the order. The
And then the
permutations
point
are
of view
limited.
scale, in terms of scale, I think it is an Ajanta which is as immense and as profuse, and despite having space, not to use the space to do it like a narration.
Right.
That is something unique only to Ajanta.
Right.
Again, it is there in pre-Renaissance. I can talk about Masaccio Giotto, and you can see that. But again, these are not like, I mean, they are large, but they're not like the scale that we're talking over here.
Right, right, right. And clearly, when it comes to the Chola, Vijayanagara, and Nayak art of the Tamil Nadu variety, it's purely linear. They go to the next level of actually labeling it, and I mean
Yeah.
not Chola, but the Vijayanagara and the Nayaka
Mm.
art. they just label it in Tamil and Telugu, and you just have to read and see and move on from one to the next scene to the next scene to the next scene, kind of a thing, right? But that's why it's mind blowing how they could do that in a sort of, it's like taking a whole bunch of scenes and then sort of
Like,
throw it onto the wall, and they
let's
all
see
go
where
and
it
sit in
falls.
different places, and they make sense. And this is nice, smooth movement from across, and great. So I want to sort of move from Ajanta, and the whole questions sort of start with Ajanta, end with Ajanta, and your focus is on its influence on modern art, right?
Mm.
Which incidentally started with somebody like Heval and Ananda Kumarasamy. Both are not Indians. Ananda Kumarasamy, the name could be Indian, but is not
It is
Indian.
not Indian.
Not Indian. Uh, and from there on, the way it made deep impression on a whole bunch of artists that you carefully explain to us, and there are names missing. I can only think of some Tamil names. Who knows? There are, in the large country like India, who else was inspired in what corner? And then what happened again? The same, like, can we show somebody as, hey, here is somebody inspired by Ajanta, is doing amazing work day in and day out. Where has it gone?
Mm.
What is it happening? I mean, you have to tell us.
Is it happening now?
Yeah.
Unfortunately, no. I have, because whatever I see so far, it's just not there. If there are people doing it, there's an artist called Talur, but he does largely sculptural works. He doesn't look at Ajanta. He doesn't look at the tradition of painting. There is another artist called Manjunath Kamath but again, who looks at only sculptural things. And actually, that's also one of my questions that I have to all the artists, saying that what is it that you actually look at, and why would you look at something like that? Say, Yamini, what is wrong with you? That's done. It's all modern. We're looking at things differently. So that's what I get back from them. So I hope.
Where do they get their inspiration from?
So I hope that there is somebody sitting somewhere who sometimes looks at this video and says, Yamini, you're wrong, I'm doing it. And then I'll be like saying, okay, great, let me see the work, and have a conversation. But no, Gauri, to ask your question, where do they get the inspiration from? It is, to put it down simply, and these days it's all about the self, and it's all about looking at what am I doing. It starts from that particular point. And it's a very inward looking process, and how they look at it, and they take it up from there. Then whether they're looking at sculpture, whether they're looking at the environment, whether they're looking at gender, these are the stories that kind of come out from their works. The contemporary is doing that.
Okay.
Again, I'm oversimplifying.
So is it, see, at one end, we are talking about how art inspires, or, classical art forms inspire artists to interpret and apply, or be influenced by, or be inspired by the great works of the past. Uh, there has to be also a kind of market, right, in a sense, which one is for your own internal satisfaction. That's great. But I guess it's the, overall art market where there is now, I mean, I don't know how it was earlier. What I hear is that there is a reasonable art market coming up in the Indian context. Indian, painters and artists are getting their due, not perhaps like the global market. Certainly, it is not what it used to be. And maybe will this be a sort of, the time when artists, use different techniques, where one of which could be the classical Indian art forms, with Ajanta as a sort of
Mm.
prime example,
Mm.
but also other regional variation. The reason why I'm saying this is that there's certainly a very distinct tribal art form of a large number of tribal communities which are unsullied simply because they have not been in contact with others, and they have not been driven in various directions. And there is this tradition of painting their own homes and their dwelling places, where it is linked to their religious rituals, etc.
Mm.
To a modern artist, it is not a ritual.
Mm.
It's not any form of worship. It's a sort of devoid of that. It's partly commercial, partly your own inside, which is pushing you, like how a literator has to write.
Mm.
As an artist, you have to paint. Or if you are a sculptor, you have to sculpt. If you
Mm.
don't do it, it is like you're bottling yourself and you're going to burst.
Yeah. Yeah.
If in this kind of a scenario, it's probably there is now maybe another resurgence that's coming up, like a Ibiheval, Ananda Kumaraswamy, Avnindranath Tagore revival.
So you have so many points packed in that one question. But okay, where do I start? Okay, let me start with the market. Um, the art market which is there is like you rightly used the word, it is a market. It is driven by certain trends and certain ideas, and it's very restrictive. Yeah.
Okay.
If you just look at that and imagine that sums up the entire art practice of India, then that is misleading. That represents a particular segment of the art community which is there within India. Is that particular segment getting its due? Yes, it is getting it now. In terms of the values which are achieved, opportunities for sale, the circuits of trade and, biennales and art fairs and all that is happening. Yes, that is one segment, which is there, of which I have been a part for the past 30 years.
Okay.
Based on that, what I have come to realize now is that there is more that exists outside of that. Because if you look at that, that is a list of, I can draw up, say, 150 artists. Okay, generous 200 artists are now. But does that mean that a country like ours only has 200 artists who are worth their while? Definitely not. There is more which is there, right? But it's just that they're not in that main circuit which gets noticed. Then what is it that the rest is doing, or what is happening to the rest? That the part of expression, the desire to communicate is there. Wherein comes in, the need for building awareness. What you do in your way,
Okay.
your heritage trust, what are you doing? You're reaching out to people, you're building a community, you're giving them an opportunity to engage, to feed their mind, their soul, to do something that is beyond what your regular thing is, to connect. You give an opportunity for connections. Okay, that part is something that is sorely lacking or very thin in our country right now.
Okay.
Those opportunities for today's practicing artists are available in cities like, say, Delhi, Bombay, to an extent in Bangalore. I'm sorry, but Chennai doesn't have that great an infrastructure when it comes to practicing artists today.
Okay.
There's one photography biennale that's happening. Cholamandal is not that active right now. There are no galleries or museums that artists or people can. If you want to go to a museum, where will you go? You can go to the government museum, but beyond that, those opportunities are there's a gap in that. Now, when that happens, it's the same classic example. When E.B. Howell was in Chennai, he didn't have the opportunity, but when he went somewhere else, he got it. So, the E.B. Howells of today are again grappling with the pull and push that you have with the market. What is
Mm.
it that I need to do? Because the government support in terms of scholarships, in terms of residencies, fellowships, private institutions, corporates kind of coming forward and doing this kind of work is sorely lacking. Yeah.
Mm.
Because what happens is, again, it's not because they don't want to do it, but there's no awareness which is there. There's no opportunity which is made available to talk about these things. And because of that, what happens is artists have a tendency, I mean, it's but natural that if that becomes their only way, like you said, it's an intense need that you have within you, right? To express. That's the only thing that you can do. Then survival comes into the play. And that's when things start getting muddy. Then you start to figure out, how do I do this? What do I do? Again, opportunities for an artist to do, unlike, the US, where you have a day job and a night job. Those things are not available. It becomes very difficult for them to kind of figure out. So I think we're moving towards that, but it's a long, slow process. If
Okay.
there is the infrastructure, the ecosystem is robust. And by
Mm.
the ecosystem, I don't only mean auctions and galleries and trade fairs, but if we have institutions, for instance, right now there are two or three that I can name. There's in Hampi, there is the Hampi Art Labs, which is founded by JSW, Jindal Steelworks. There is
Mhm.
Arthashila, which is run by a private family, where they have spaces in multiple cities, like they have in Ahmedabad, Goa, Shantiniketan, and Delhi. What do they do? It's a not for profit, but they, like you have these sessions, they have multiple sessions on
Right.
contemporary art. Right? But those I can name and I can end the list. That's it, right? So
Mm.
these opportunities need to be there, and that's where your expression ecosystem kind of comes in. And the last point, which is a pain point for me, where you kind of said that, for the tribal artist, art becomes a part of their life and their religion, ritual, and
Rituals.
practice. That's a myth.
Is it? Okay. Okay.
I'll tell you why it's a myth. I mean, that's another long drawn discussion. Because if you look at it, if you look at any of the tribes, whether you look at, the Gond people, or you look at the Varli, or you look at even the Madhubani. Madhubani, it is true, but that's not tribal, that's folk, where the women would paint the houses for a wedding season and it was meant for their private consumption. But what we call as, to give you a classic example, Gond painting, God's painting didn't exist. These are people who are, itinerant. They move from one place to another. Their way of life is very hard. They had something that they do on the walls. And I've spoken to these artists and I've looked at the history. They do little flowers or something when a new house is built. But what we consume as painting didn't exist before 1986.
I see. Okay.
It was part, I mean, but it comes from well-meaning intention. So it was
Yeah.
part of the drive to give the tribal people
A
an
chance to a livelihood.
chance
Some
to
kind of an income stream, I
in more
guess.
than income, a chance to express, to create something. So there was an artist called J. Swaminathan who was in Delhi, who was with the Communist Party, who kind of starts painting. He's given an opportunity to build an institute in Bhopal, which is called as the Bharat Bhavan. And he wants it to be the expression of true India. And then he has a team of young interns who are anthropologists, who go around the country looking for people who do something that is creative, whether it's music, textile. And they come across this one man called Jangar, who's fantastic at playing flute, and he keeps scribbling on the grass. So then
Mhm.
they bring him in and they give him paper, and then he starts making phenomenal art, which is nothing like anybody has seen before. And he creates art for not only for himself, but for his brother, for his cousin, saying these are the styles that you will paint in. That's called painting for you. What you have is Varli is again something that is right. Ritual again, only women painted, nobody else could see. But what you see Jivya Some Mashe doing, or Baru, Vanguard, or the Vaida brothers doing, they've taken it, they've evolved it. I'm not
Mm.
dismissing them, it is there. But the forms that we see today, and we say, oh, it is done and unchanging. No, these are things that they have adapted for this consumption of exotic India,
Mm.
Indian art, and that there is art in India, not only in the art schools, but elsewhere also. So there's a lot of, how should I say, adjustments that have been made to the way it gets presented. And
Mhm.
not all of it, what we say, is part of the ritual or religion. A lot of it is individual genius and their creativity, which needs to be celebrated. And unfortunately, it gets as timeless, endless, ever changing, which is not true, which is evolving and
Yeah,
kind
but
of.
one thing is there when you said that now artists look inward for their inspiration.
Mm.
Is it also true that modern Indian art is largely individualistic as opposed to Ajanta, which was like a collective social artistic expression? Would you
Yeah,
say that? Like,
absolutely.
yeah. Like
Absolutely.
nobody minded painting exactly like the next guy. Whereas today, even in an art school, you don't
Mm.
want to sketch exactly like the next guy,
Correct.
So
Because
it's
again, the purpose was different, right? Here, that was about, sorry, again, who are we to say that they're not individuals? I mean, we look at it today as something uniform. But maybe
mm.
there was a way of saying that, oh, my horse is different. And there are little quirks
But
which
overall, the idiom is
overall,
a
yes.
collective social
Yeah,
expression
yeah,
of
yeah,
art, which
yeah.
which perhaps we don't find it in modern Indian art so
The
much.
need is not there. The times have changed. The way people, for lack of a better word, consume art is different. The way it is presented is different. The identity around it is, everything has changed. So it has to be, what an individual is trying to say, or his perspective that kind of comes across.
Okay. A lot of comments by Ranjan Joshi
Okay.
are not exactly questions, but I has added a lot of value in the chat with very perceptive comments on
Yeah.
and as the uh, lecture was going on.
Yeah.
So I'm leaving them because it's not specifically a question directed at you.
Hmm.
But also, I think we are really, stretched our time, and it was very engrossing conversation. It's about 7:30 now,
Yeah.
so we will let you go. It's been a very, thought-provoking conversation, and uh, what I don't know whether this is the right forum, but if such things even exist, some kind of an action plan. What are we supposed to do now? Now that we know about all these things, you know, the
Mm.
one thing that I can think of is whether we can do it, I can do it, or whatever it is. But creating a lot of galleries, creating public infrastructure for artists to learn,
Mm.
paint, display, and in the process also establish their uh, market.
Mm. Mm.
We can say there is internet, go and sell what, and how do you create, and
Mm.
how do you interact, and where is the artist adda where they can congregate, talk,
Correct.
discuss,
Absolutely.
fight. You are right. The art scene is, probably, people criticize Chennai for its lack of nightlife. I guess we have to criticize it for the lack of art life, to the
Right, right.
extent that it is there. Obviously, in institutions like JJ School of Art, and
Mm.
I don't think we have equivalent of that. We have the Government College of Fine Arts both in Chennai and in Kumbakonam,
Mm.
but perhaps nowhere of the level to which we have the JJ School as an example. I'm not saying there are many more elsewhere, but not here, and that brings that respectability and going, and what kind of people are brought in to study there, and what is their access to capital, what can they go and do, right?
Yeah.
Even I've seen Ajanta is always there in their travels. The students of
Correct.
government school, they love to go to Ajanta to study. But how many days can they stay there? It's about the finances,
Yeah.
and all of that will have to be looked into. I think there's a lot of, I think in the society at large, what kind of emphasis that is being done on IT and finance and such.
True.
You're not giving that kind of emphasis or even a fraction of that for art. We hope your talk triggers this in the mind of those few millionaires who are probably following us now,
I
and
hope so
decide,
too.
decide
I
that
hope
they got to do something about this and
Yeah.
go and do something about this.
Yeah.
Maybe they will give you a call. Let's hope so.
Listen, I'm happy to kind of help, instigate, provoke, set it up, but do.
Yeah, that is really a
Wonderful.
very insightful talk. To me personally, I have appreciated Ajanta so much, but this is the first time I realized how much it has influenced modern Indian art. And perhaps I would look at modern Indian artists with a different eye now to see is there any semblance of Ajanta here. That's as far as my personal perception is concerned.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
otherwise, it was really very nice to have you.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for the opportunity and listening to me and my rant about the whole art community. But I enjoyed this. I always enjoy talking.
Me
So,
too, me too. The handful of audience who have been following us right through, I'm sure also
Enjoyed it, yeah.
certainly
Equally.
enjoyed
Yeah.
this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you
Yeah.
so much.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Before we conclude, just a gentle reminder of our upcoming events. I think I already mentioned this, but once again, I'd just like to tell you that our House Art workshop is coming up on August 3rd, 2025. The promotional material will be available in the social media and in your mailers. Anybody who's interested may register and participate. The nominations for the Swaminathan Award are open as of today. If you know of anybody who you think is worthy of being nominated, kindly do so. Once again, our registration page will give you all the details. And last but not the least, as I said, Senior Epigraphist Professor Srinivas V. Padigar is the recipient of our V. Venkaya Epigraphy Award for 2025. To know more about him and to listen to him in his award-winning lecture, kindly join us on July 26, 2025, which is a Saturday at RK Convention Center, Mylapore. For all those who can't make it in person, the talk will be available in our YouTube channel. We also look forward to seeing you next month in our monthly talk on the first Saturday of August. Thank you so much. Thank you for being with us so
Thank
patiently.
you.